Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2021 Ohioana Book Festival. I'm Carolyn Melvin. I'm a founding member of Buckeye Crime Writers. We're the Central Ohio chapter of Sisters in Crime. You can find us at buckeyecrimewriters.org if you're interested in joining a writing group. I'm extremely pleased to welcome you to the Cozy Mystery Writers panel. Before we get started, I'd like to thank our festival sponsors and partners, all of whom you can find listed on the Ohioana website. And thanks to our official bookseller, the Book Loft of German Village. You can get copies of all the books featured at the festival by going online to bookloft.com. So before we get started, I just wanted to explain a little bit how this is going to work. We'll save 10 to 15 minutes at the end of the presentation for your writing questions. So you can submit any questions as they occur to you via the chat function on your screen, and then I'll read them to the panelists when we get to the Q&A portion of the program. So I'm now pleased to welcome our extremely talented and beloved author panel. I'll ask each of you to raise your hands raise your hand, or both if you want, when I introduce you. First, we have Mary Ellis, whose featured title is One for the Road, a Bourbon Tour Mystery. Next is Amanda Flower, whose featured title this year is Courting Can Be Killer, an Amish Matchmaker #2. We also have Eileen Curley Hammond, whose featured title is Murder So Hot, a Murray March mystery. We also have Patricia Sargent Matthews, writing as Olivia Matthews, whose title this year is Murder by Page 1, a Peach Coast Library mystery. And we also have John A. Vanek, whose featured title is Absolution, a Father Jake Austin mystery. So I'm going to ask the panel some questions. Some are addressed to everyone. Some will just be addressed to an individual author, and we'll kind of go by random so everybody has a chance to go first. So the first question is, please tell us about yourself as a writer and what you write. So Mary, we'll start with you.
Hi, everyone. This is my first Zoom, so if I make a fool of myself, please forgive me. Right now, I am writing cozy mysteries. They were set in the South, and I believe Kentucky is still the South. So they're set in Kentucky. My first of the series, One for the Road, is set just outside of Louisville. Before that, I wrote a plethora of Amish fiction set mainly in Ohio. And I've also wrote some Civil War mysteries set in destinations where the Civil War was fought. And I'm very glad to be here. Thank you.
Well, good. Well, thank you, Mary. Olivia, can you tell us about what you're doing?
Sure. First, thanks to everyone for showing up so that I'm not sitting here by myself. I'm really excited to be on this panel. I adore these authors. I write mysteries as Olivia Matthews and romance as Patricia Sargent and as Regina Hart.
Well, great. Thank you. Amanda?
Hi, everyone. It's so nice to be here. I write a number of cozy mystery series. I write 2 series set in Holmes County, Ohio. One is an Amish candy shop series, and the one is the Amish matchmaker series, and they went intertwined. So the book that we're talking about today is Courting Can Be Killer. And then I also write a number of other cozies, magical cozies. I write a PI series for Hallmark as well. So lots of cozies. My 38th cozy comes out on Tuesday, actually. So I've written a ton.
Wow, Amanda. Well, thanks for sharing that. John?
Yeah, I'm John Vanek. I write the Father Jake Austin mysteries, and Father Jake is kind of a 21st century Father Brown with a little bit more edge. They're all set in Ohio. I was close friends with a couple of Catholic priests. I'm a physician. I worked at a Catholic hospital for many years and became close friends with a couple of Catholic priests. And not that they did any of the things that Father Jake do, but my characters are somewhat based on them and our relationship. And because I was a physician, a lot of the action takes place in hospitals whenever possible. So I write what I know, and that's what I know, and that's what I write.
Well, good. Well, thank you. Welcome. Eileen?
Hi, I'm Eileen Curley Hammond, and my book that we're featuring is Murder So Hot. I came late to the writing profession. I had a whole nother job gig that I was doing, and when I retired at age 60, I started writing. And Murder So Hot is my 5th book in the Mary March Mystery Series. And my 6th book, which is Murder So Tempting, will be coming out in September.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Well, my second general question to everyone is, how did you choose to write cozy mysteries? What appeals to you about the cozy mystery genre? Amanda?
I love cozy mysteries. It's what I read when I was younger. My mother was an avid mystery reader, and she would come home from the library with, a stack of 30 books and read them in a week. So they were always around. And when it was time, I always knew I wanted to be a writer since I was a young girl, but when it was time to kind of pick what I wanted to write, I was just drawn to the whodunit aspect of a cozy, the puzzle aspect, and that also it's not scary. I don't think I could ever write anything very scary. So like hard boiled or forensic was kind of out for me, but I wanted to do mystery. So that's how I ended up in cozy.
Well, good. Well, thank you. Olivia, how about you?
Actually, there's so many things about the cozy mystery genre that I really love. As Amanda said, the puzzle part of it is a lot of fun for me. And the other thing is that typically speaking, the detectives in the cozy mysteries are amateur sleuths. And I love the premise of putting ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances and seeing how they can resolve the investigation. They're not trained to investigate. They don't necessarily know how to physically defend themselves, but they rise to the occasion, and that really appeals to me.
Well, that's great. That appeals to me too. Mary, how about you?
Oh dear. I kind of write the story. I had 2 series, a 4-book series and a 3-book series that followed it. And I thought I was writing just a flat old mystery. Now I'm not into heavy forensics or blood or, anything, like that. And my agent said, "Oh no, these are romantic suspense." I said, "Okay, then we've got a genre." And then when I started a new series and I finished the book, my agent says, "Oh no, this is a cozy," which is fine with me because I read a lot of cozies and I love cozies, and yet I never considered myself a cozy writer until now. So I'm very happy you put me on this panel because I'm new to the cozy genre.
Well, good. Well, what do you think you changed from series 1 to series 2 that transformed you from romantic suspense to cozy?
I have a dog in the story. I don't know.
That might do it.
No, it's a very sweet story, and it's not romantic suspense. It's just a sweet, cozy story. I don't think it's the classic follow a formula, but I've read so many of my friends' cozies and they don't follow any particular formula either. They just write a great book. So I hope I can compete with them.
Well, great. Well, welcome to the cozy genre.
Thank you.
So, John, how about you?
Yeah, although I read a lot of mysteries that are also not cozy, I prefer as Olivia does, to pit an ordinary person against a first-time challenge that they've never considered encountering, and see how they behave and how they work their way through it. I didn't want my character to be the toughest guy in the room who could, disarm everybody and blow up the passing train or whatever. I wanted him to think his way through it and get us through it without the violence. And being a priest, that seemed appropriate. So Father Jake does not carry a gun. He's very cozy.
Well, good. That's great. Well, Eileen, how about you?
Well, first off, Amanda, your mother and my mother would have been like best friends. Okay. I grew up with Nancy Drew, loved Carolyn Kane's, stories of Nancy Drew and everything. Those were wonderful. And I'm a big Agatha Christie fan. And I guess nowadays those would be considered cozies. So that was a huge influence on me. And like Amanda, I also, I don't think I could write thrillers and, just, a little high on the squeamish factor. So cozies really kind of fit the bill for me.
Well, good. That's great to know. Next, I wanted to ask you all a little bit about your writing process and how you come up with story ideas. So Eileen, I'm going to mix things up a little bit and start with you this time.
I think I have to, when I meet people, I should warn them, I will use something that you tell me in my stories because I find, inspiration everywhere. And in my latest book, Murder So Hot, the gentleman finds out that he knew he was adopted and he had a DNA test. And through the DNA test, he finds out he has a half brother. And that actually happened to a friend of mine. And of course, everything else in the book is totally made up, but that kernel really gave me an idea and an inspiration. And so that's how that part of that book was born. So I use everything from everybody. So sorry about that. Apologies to any friends or family that's watching.
John, how about you? Your writing process and how you come up with story ideas.
Yeah, I'm not a plotter. I'm not one of those people who plots his way through a story before he starts. I'm what people call a pantser. I fly by the seat of my pants. And I know the beginning of the story. I know roughly where it's going to end. And I begin throwing problems at my characters. And I know my characters very well. My three main characters have very different personalities and skills. Father Jake's a priest. His best friend is a blind lady, Emily. And his other good friend is a policeman. And they each approach the problem with different skills. And they often tell me where the story's going. I think I know, and then one of them will surprise me and say, I don't think I'd do that. I think I'd really try this in this situation. So I kind of let my characters guide me toward that ending that I've got in mind. And for me, that's the fun part of writing. I really enjoy that.
Well, good. Thank you. Mary, how about you?
Well, I start from a different perspective. I start with setting. My husband and I, for the last 20 years, we've done a lot of traveling. And now that we are both, I'm semi-retired. I will still write, but he's fully retired. And we're going to travel a lot more. And even 20 years ago, we were on a trip in New Orleans, and then we booked kind of spur of the moment, a bed and breakfast way out in the country. I thought it was bayou country. That's how much I knew at the time. But I certainly learned a lot. But while we were out there, many things went on in this rather spooky bed and breakfast. It was an old, I wouldn't really call it Gothic, but an old Victorian. And the story just evolved out of that trip. And since then, I start with setting. I have a book set in Charleston, in Savannah, in Natchez, in Memphis, on an island. The book previous to my last one was set on an island where John F. Kennedy Jr. got married many years ago. It's called Cumberland. Of course, I had to fictionalize it quite a bit because it's privately owned, most of it. And so I have a very good friend who lives in Kentucky. So I have been stomping all over that state, especially when I was doing Amish, because they have a high Amish population. So I know bourbon tours are very big. And when I had never tasted bourbon, and I've only tasted it once, and I cannot say it'll be my go-to beverage, but I just love taking a bourbon tour. It was a lot of fun, and they are very popular. So it's very natural for me to take a tour and let the story evolve out of my setting. And of course, you know, there's going to be a dead body fairly soon.
Of course. Great. Well, Olivia, how about you? Anything about your writing process and how you come up with your ideas?
Typically, it depends on the story itself, how the idea comes to me. I know my character, and I know what she wants and why she wants it and what's important to her. But as far as the plot, it comes to me in different ways. So, for example, for the first time ever with my latest release, Murder by Page One, the title came to me. I could not get that Murder by Page One out of my head. And my process was to try to figure out how do we get to a story that fits that title. And I couldn't, my heroine is a librarian, but I couldn't see myself putting a dead body in a library. So that's how I came up with the book signing. I was too squeamish about a corpse in a library.
Well, good. Well, Amanda might have some thoughts on that. Since you were a librarian, right?
I was a librarian for a very long time. And never found a dead body, which is a good thing. As far as where I come up with my ideas, similar to what the other panelists have said, my ears and eyes are always open. I'm always looking for the next thing to spark a plot line, because I know I have a number of things to write, so I'm always on the lookout. A perfect example of that is Courting Can Be Killer. My husband and I are building a house, and the Amish are building it. So we last year, or when I was writing this book, so it was last year, we were going back and forth to Holmes County a lot to meet with the Amish builder and the architect who was not Amish that was helping design the house. And when we were going down there, a flea market was on fire. It was like a 5-alarm fire, and it burned down and it was closed. So that happens in Courting Can Be Killer. In that case, it was a lightning strike, an accident. Of course, being a mystery, it's a little bit more nefarious, and there's a dead body in the flea market. But that happening definitely sparked my interest, because we were sitting on, I think we were on 39 for a while, which is one of the main roads that goes through Holmes County, just trying to get to our Amish builder's shop, but we couldn't go because of the fire. So anywhere and everywhere.
Well, good. That's great. Well, I guess the next question I wanted to ask was, you're all Ohio writers. So how does Ohio feature in your books? And I was going to start with Olivia this time.
Well, Ohio features in my romances, but not in my cozy, at least not yet. My first series, the Sisterly Mystery series, it was set in a fictitious town in upstate New York, and my heroine was from California. In this series, the Peach Coast Library mystery series, the story is set in a small fictitious town in coastal Georgia, and the heroine is a transplanted native New Yorker. I wanted that clash so that my character could be a fish out of water. But I'm from Brooklyn, New York. I now live in the Midwest. so I could understand that clash of cultures, the Midwestern environment versus the New York environment. But I didn't think that the clash would be as easy to illustrate. For me, it was a lot easier if I were to choose a Southern location. And I could use some of the Southernisms to befuddle the native New Yorker. But I used my experience trying to get acclimated to the Midwestern culture with my character in the Peach Coast Library mystery series.
Well, good. I love the juxtaposition, and the fish out of water thing is always an excellent choice, I think.
I love that.
Amanda?
All of my Amish mysteries, which there's been many, that's probably what I'm known for the most, like over almost 20 now, if not over 20, are all set in Ohio, primarily homes in Wayne counties. However, some of my other series are set New York. I have one set in Scotland, and different Michigan, so different parts of the country. And I think even though that's the case, I always somehow make a reference to Ohio in a book. I guess I'm such an Ohio girl because I was reading page proofs for a book set in Michigan, and someone made like a reference to Cleveland that was just kind of like an offhand comment. So I guess that's my little nod to my home state, even when I'm writing about farther away places.
Well, good. Well, I'm sure we all appreciate that. We get a little nod to our home states. Eileen, how about you?
So it's interesting when I sort of purposely said I'm not going to set the small town that I write about in a particular state. But like Amanda, I find little things creeping in my first book, Murder So Simple. There is something that happens at the Cedar Bog near Urbana. Now, I don't specifically say that it happened in Urbana, but I do say that it happened at Cedar Bog. So I think I find things coming in, although similar to Olivia, I'm actually from New Jersey originally. So I'm kind of a transplant here. And I also like the fish out of water. Murder So Hot actually takes place in Phoenix and Scottsdale. And I like that because the small town sleuth from Hopeful goes to Phoenix and has to solve a problem there. So now she's coming from a small town and now is suddenly in a big town. And I liked that kind of juxtaposition. So that was kind of interesting for me.
That's great. Well, John, how about your stories?
Yeah, all my series is set in Ohio. I lived virtually all of my life in Ohio and practiced medicine there. And I got tired of reading books set in New York, Chicago, and LA, and I thought the Midwest was getting a bit overlooked. And when I wrote the first book in the series, Daros, I set it in a small college town. And the reason I chose that town is because of its Underground Railroad background, which almost made it a character in the book. And so I've stuck with the entire series in Ohio. The fourth book in this, the featured book, which I don't have with me, is this one. It's called Absolution. But the fourth book in the series is called Bedeviled and should be out in about a month. And I'm working on the fifth book, and it is also set in Ohio. So I write what I know.
That's good. I appreciate your loyalty to the Buckeye State. So that's great. Mary, how about you? You've written in and out of Ohio.
I've written, I think this will be let me reach for it. Oh, I happen to have a copy handy. My 25th published book. As I said, it's set in Kentucky, but that's just right across the border from Ohio, Louisville. About half of them were set in Ohio, mainly like Amanda, Wayne, and Holmes County. I did have one set in Lancaster and wherever the Amish live. I have been there. Oh, except no, they're I believe that, the originals are still in Europe. I've not visited their communities. However, I hope to get back to Ohio as far as cozies. And I just scheduled a bike riding trip to Kelly's Island this summer so we could ride our bikes. And I'll be listening for a story.
Well, that's great. I'm sure you'll find one.
Yep, me too.
So thank you. That's wonderful. We've touched on this earlier. Cozy mysteries frequently feature pets of various types. Do you have any animals in your books? So John, I'm going to start with you. It's okay if you don't, but if you do, we'd love to hear about it.
I do have the occasional animal in my book, but that's probably the least cozy part of my stories. So they're not central to my story. So I'll probably pass this question on to the other panelists.
Okay. Eileen, how about you?
So there are 2 cats in my cozy, Drambuie and Corvassier are the 2 cats. And oddly enough, my husband and I have 2 cats, but their names are not Drambuie and Corvassier. So they do cat things. They're not magical, but they do cat things all the time in the books, and it's kind of fun to write about them.
So why did you choose to include them?
Because I have 2 cats. I love cats. I'm a big cat person, so I couldn't imagine writing a story and not having somebody have a pet. So whether dogs or cats, there had to be something, and it adds an element of lovability to characters when they have pets, I think, because they show their attachment and their affection to the animals as they go through. Plus, it gives them somebody else to talk to. I don't know about, the people that have pets in their stories, but my character always talks to her pets, so you get to find out things that she's chatting with her pets. And oddly enough, I might be the crazy cat lady, but I talk with my cat all the time too. So they're not very judgmental listeners. Okay. That's all I've got to say.
Cats are good for that.
That's right.
Absolutely. Well, Amanda, how about you? I know you're a cat person.
So many animals in my books. I'm definitely a cat person. I actually have one of my cats sleeping on the other side of the computer. And in all of my series, there are at least 1 or 2 central animal characters. And I've done a variety of animals because I've written so many cozies. So lots of cats, lots of dogs, but in Courting Can Be Killer, her sidekicks are 2 goats, Phil and Peter. And they get into a lot of trouble and cause more trouble than helping her solve the mystery. In the Amish candy shop, there's a polka dotted potbelly pig that is a comfort pig that is in every book. And he actually is also in the Matchmaker series because he's very popular with the readers. Now, I'll just say the Amish don't have comfort pigs. They don't raise pigs for friends. So the owner of the pig is English or not Amish. But his name's Jethro, and there's like a stuffed animal of him and everything. Like he's got a whole following. So I love animals.
Well, great. Thank you. I never thought about a polka dot potbelly pig. That's a good one. Olivia, how about you in your books?
First, I have to say, Amanda, I love those goats. I really love the goats.
Thank you.
So thank you for that. If I could make a long story short, when I first started writing cozies, my first series was the Sister Lou Mysteries. And I didn't have any animals in it because, as Eileen pointed out, there are other characters for my amateur sleuth to speak with. She has her friends, she has her family, she has God. When would I pace in a pet? So I didn't have a pet when the series first started, but then having a cat became a thing. So I put a stray cat in the second Sister Lou mystery, and he pops up again in the third one. But when I started the Peach Coast Library mysteries, I realized, I had to have a cat in it. So I gave my amateur sleuth a rescue cat who has a little bit of an attitude. He is a little bit of a judgmental roommate. But I'm able to give her time to chat with him, to make him more in the story.
Well, that's great. Another cat person. Mary, how about you? Do you include animals in your stories?
Well, I don't know how I couldn't. As you could see, my dog is in the picture right now and she's invited into the picture. But in my current book, I have a dog. I usually have cats. Now, we are down to just one dog right now. Our cat passed last year at 19, and amazingly, nothing has wandered up our driveway lately, seeking a home. But in my Amish stories, I've always wanted to have sheep. I've just always wanted to have sheep, and I always wanted to have my own horse. And so I find myself writing about animals that I lust after, I guess, that I want my own horse farm, or my own sheep farm. So in my Amish, there's a lot of sheep and or there's a lot of horses. And yeah, the Amish don't have pets as much as they have, like cats in the barn to control the mice. That's not me. I let the mice live in my barn all they want. I have never had an animal as kind of like a central character, but I love Amanda's stories. So I'm going to try to figure out how to do that intelligently.
Well, good. We'll look forward to seeing that from you, Mary. That's great. So then I was going to ask you each some individual questions. Some of them we've already touched on, but Amanda, we know you've written a lot of books that feature the Amish. What originally attracted you to writing about them?
Well, when I was a young librarian, the first job I got was at a small college that was in Knox County, and it was right on the border of an Amish community. So I saw Amish all the time. They'd hitch their buggies up to hitching posts at Walmart in this little town. But I really got to know, when I lived there, more former Amish, because one of the librarians I worked with, he and his wife were in this group that helped a young Amish that wanted to leave the community get like the paperwork they needed to, move around in greater American society, like Social Security numbers and a birth certificate. Not all Amish have those things when they're born, because they're born at home or in a birthing center with a midwife. So I just thought that was interesting. And then it was just a situation I happened to flippantly say to my agent one day, I know some former Amish people, and she was like, cha-ching, like her eyes got all big. And she said, you need to write about that. So I definitely went back to that town and did a lot of research, because I didn't want to misrepresent in any way. Not that the Amish in real life are running around chasing potbelly pigs, but I wanted to be mindful of representing their religion accurately and respectfully too. So I did a lot of research after we had that conversation.
Good. Well, thank you. Mary, you had told us previously that you also had written a number of books set among the Amish, and now you've changed, made a number of changes, and your newest is in Bourbon Country. You talked about that a little bit, but what specifically appealed to you about setting a book in bourbon country, and how does it kind of feature in your new series?
Well, it's murders take place on these tours. You know, tourists love to take tours. And whether you like bourbon or you like silkworms or you like forestry, I'm like a professional tourist. It's what I really enjoy doing. Wherever we go, I'll sign up for every tour they give. And some are great, right up my alley, and some not so much. So it's just natural for if I'm in an area, and of course around bourbon country, which is about I don't know, I call it maybe a 5-county area, but there's actually a little bit by Lexington, but most of it centers around Louisville and out in the country. I just have to take a tour, even though that particularly isn't I like, if I'm going to have a drink of something, I like a glass of wine. And of course I've taken winery tours. And I'm never, ever going to set a murder in a winery, because those who write those know everything there is to know about wine. And my goodness, no. When I have a glass of wine, it comes out of a cardboard box. So that should tell you something right there. But anyway, I was, took a tour and I loved it. And I got a lot of great pictures from it. And it's just, if you ever take a tour, if you ever go to like where they have a lot of casks of whether it's wine or whiskey or I don't know, even if they put hot chocolate in it, it's just a cavernous building, and it's naturally spooky, and it's just wonderful to set a murder mystery there, I think. I hope my readers think so too.
I would say it sounds like a great place for a murder. An excellent choice. Well, Olivia, I wanted to ask you next. Your new book, Murder by Page One, has a librarian as a protagonist. What kind of reaction have you had from the library community about your new protagonist?
Well, I haven't specifically heard from a lot of librarians. I have some of my regular readers are current and former librarians, and they have enjoyed it much to my relief. And some of them were actually my subject matter experts, so I would say to them, well, this is what I want it to look like, and this is what I think their day would be like, and they would give me feedback, which was really helpful. I mean, I could stalk the libraries, but I just wanted to make sure that I was getting some nuances correct.
Yes, talking to your friends is probably better than stalking the library or a librarian. How did you come up with having a librarian as your protagonist?
Oh, thank you for asking. One of the things that, as I've gotten more experienced, aka older, in writing, one of the things that I wanted to do was to highlight professions and communities that I especially admire, to just give them a little bit of a boost. So my first series featured a sister, a Catholic sister, because I really admired the congregation that I was working with at the time. And this one, the librarian and the library is in the center of the story, because I really love libraries and I admire librarians. And I don't think people really understand the value that libraries bring to communities. It's not just about borrowing books. There are programs and services, both for children and adults, that help lift up communities, that these services that libraries provide. And I wanted to put an emphasis on that in the story plot.
Well, good. I suspect all of us grew up spending a lot of time in libraries.
One of my fantasies was to be locked in a library overnight.
Did that ever happen to you?
No, I kept trying.
Oh, someday, who knows? You may get there yet. John, you mentioned your books feature a man who is a priest and a doctor. What gave you the idea for that combination?
And yeah, as I said before, I practiced medicine in a hospital for almost 20 years and became close friends with a couple of priests. And one of them became my drinking buddy. And he would take off his collar sometimes and we'd have a beer or three. And he said to me, I was raised Catholic, and he said to me one night, John, I don't know what to do with these feelings I have for this nun. And I almost fell off the chair because like many Catholics, I had my priest up here on a pedestal. And as I watched this righteous man struggle with very normal feelings for another person, I realized how stereotypically we think of all professions. I mean, not just priests, but you know a lawyer or a doctor and you think you know them because of what they do. And it's a stereotype that's ridiculous. And it's as foolish to put a priest up on a pedestal as it is to consider them all pedophiles. So I wanted my amateur sleuth to be a spiritual man, but with all the flaws and struggles that the rest of us have, as my friend has. And that's how Father Jake came about. And because I was a physician, I wanted to get him into a hospital for part of the plot. I did some research and was surprised at how many Protestant ministers are also physicians. So as I started to look into it, I realized that there are also some Catholic priests who are both physicians and priests. And one of my priest friends said, I like your character, John, but you've got him in the wrong order. He should be a chameleon. Well, I was raised Catholic. I'd never heard of the chameleon order, but they're like Jesuits or Franciscans, and they're a real order, and they are all over the world. And they take, in addition to poverty, chastity, and obedience as vows, they take a fourth vow to care for the sick. So Father Jake ended up being a chameleon. So I guess the thing I like best about as an author is when somebody will read my books and enjoy the mystery, but say, gosh, I learned something new about medicine, or gosh, I learned something new about spirituality, or made me reevaluate my own spirituality. And that's been a real fun part of being an author for me. So that's Father Jake.
Well, that's great. Thank you very much. Cozies are not all tea and cats. We can address other kinds of issues as well. Eileen, I was going to ask you, religion is a central theme in your books. What drew you to that?
Well, it's interesting. I think the cozy genre harkens back to a kinder, gentler time, and unfortunately people get killed in those stories, but the small town feel just, appealed to me. And, I grew up in a small town in New Jersey. I know people don't believe that there are actual small towns in New Jersey, but there are. And the community really sort of revolved around the church. And my in-laws are actually from a small town in Pennsylvania, Lidditz, Pennsylvania, which is a big Moravian town. And so I've sort of combined, even though Mary is a Catholic, because that's my background, there's a lot of small town feel that I've given the stories that come from Lidditz, Pennsylvania, which is also an Amish kind of place too. So it's always fascinating to me, just the interrelationships between people and their friends, and sort of this central theme of religion that kind of binds all that together.
Great. Well, thank you. We have about 15 minutes left, and I do have a final question, but I think I'm going to go to the questions through the chat. And if we have a couple minutes at the end, I'll get to the last question that I was going to ask. But here we go. Hopefully I can read it all here. Here's a question from Lynn Ford to the panel. Are your main characters' personalities completely developed before you begin writing a book? So that's a good one. Who would like to start?
Mine are. because my stories are character driven, and I need to understand what my character wants and why and what's keeping her from achieving her goal before I can plot my story.
Good. Yeah. Okay, John, sure.
Yeah, my characters are also my stories are character driven, and as I said, Father Jake's based on a couple of priests I knew. The blind lady is actually his Father Jake's high school sweetheart, but she's based on a blind woman that I'm close friends with, and who has helped me make her a much more real character. And the black policeman in the story is based on my racquetball partner. Not that he's a policeman, but his personality is quirky enough that I stole it for the book. So that's how I approach it. Very, very much that way.
Thank you. Mary?
I'm a plotter. I definitely plot my story out, but I cannot develop my characters until I start writing. My current book, In One for the Road, I thought she was going to be a whole lot sweeter, but by the end, she was a little crustier than I had pegged her to be. And I think that's just my personality. The older I get, the crustier I get coming through. And although I did plot one particular Amish book that I have in mind, it was a mystery. It was a mystery set in the South. My editor at the time, Kim Moore, who was a great editor, I had sent in the synopsis. She approved it. I wrote the book, but I got 4/5 the way done, and I thought, no, this guy will not work as the villain, as the murderer. So I changed it, and I didn't even tell her. I just sent it in, and she says, "You changed who did the murder." So, because I got to a point where I thought it's going to be so plausible, it's going to be so easily to figure out, and so I didn't make it tricky or anything. There was just a more natural person that I didn't see coming, and so hopefully my readers didn't see it coming either. So they definitely develop themselves as we go along.
Thank you. Amanda, did you have anything you wanted to say about that question?
Yeah, I think my characters, I have kind of like the broad strokes of, I'm sorry, Mr. Tumnus is here. Tummy. I have the broad strokes of what they're like, but through especially the first book of a series, when we're still getting to know each other, they surprise me. Like they'll reveal something about their past that explains why they're behaving a certain way that I didn't expect. And I'm like, okay, let's go down this rabbit hole and see what happens. So I think it's a little bit of both. So I have their stuff when you meet someone on the street, like generally what they look like. I think you can get an essence of a person if they're generally friendly or grumpy or not, even if you pass them on the street, that sort of thing. But the other things are revealed through the writing.
Good. And Eileen, how about you?
Yeah, I'm going to say I'm an organic writer, so pantser, like John said before. So I have no idea when I started my first book, I had no idea who I was writing about, what I was writing about. I don't do a beginning and an ending. I mean, I don't even know that, right, until I start writing. And then of course that means I have to go back and change things, so but now being 6 books in, five books published, and the 6th one on its way, you then have to start to pay real attention to make sure you don't have your character do something, or one of the side characters do something that they would not do because you've set that up through 4 or 5 other books. And it was kind of interesting because my husband's my alpha reader, and he was reading one of the previous books, and he said, "Oh, no, the ex-husband would never do that." And I was like, he's right, but I love the scene. And I was like, you're right, he wouldn't do that. That's silly. That hasn't come up. And so you really sort of have to pay a lot of attention in a series. So that's the only thing I would add.
Well, good. Well, the next question is actually about characters as well. Katie Brandt asks, well, she says, like Olivia said, these books are about amateur sleuths. How do you pick the main character for a cozy, or create the main character for a cozy mystery series? Someone who can be in the mix, likable, and grow over the series. Does anyone want to start that one off?
I'll kick that off. For me, I came from the insurance industry, and specifically life insurance and annuities. And I had never heard of a cozy where they had an insurance agent as the protagonist, but an insurance agent is in everybody's lives. Everybody has insurance, right? For your house or for your animals or for, yourself. So I thought it would be relatable, and I hadn't heard about it. And I said, well, this person knows everybody in town because of that, right? So I thought that would be a good start. And that's how I ended up with Mary March, who's my protagonist, is an insurance agent in town.
Maybe you'll start a trend, Eileen. Olivia, do you have any thoughts on that? On your character?
I think that's a really great question. And part of it is, as I had mentioned in passing, is that I wanted to highlight specific professions that I admire. But also when I was thinking about it, these people who go into these professions have certain characteristics, generally speaking. These are all generalizations. And that's what made me think that a Catholic sister or a librarian would be able to have the curiosity to want to investigate certain mysteries.
That's good. Amanda, do you have, how do you decide on your main character?
I think I start kind of with the hook of the series. So for people that may not know, a lot of times in cozies, and then it's also popular in romance, like there's a hook that they sell the series on. So I have an Amish candy shop, an Amish matchmaker, a magical bookshop for another series. So that's the hook. So kind of like what Olivia said, who would be in that environment? Knowing that I have to write about a candy maker in Amish country, what would she be like? And an Amish matchmaker in Courting Can Be Killer, she's ended up being a 76-year-old Amish widow that is my protagonist. And that was kind of determined by who I thought would be a matchmaker in Amish country. So that's how I come up with it. And I want to apologize if you hear meowing. My cats are fighting. And the funny thing is they never fight. So this is really, I'm trying to get them to stop without, making too much disturbance. So I apologize.
Well, and then I was sort of thinking, do you have your goats in the house?
No, it's my one cat has been sick. So he's been to the vet a lot, and I think he smells odd to the other cat right now. So there's some hissing and meowing happening. So I apologize.
Not a problem. Mary, how about you?
By contrary, I don't think Chloe has moved in the last hour, and so I'm starting to get a little worried. But Chloe, are you okay? I'm starting to worry. Anyway, to answer the question, in my current series, she's a journalist. She's a journalist who comes down to cover the bourbon tours because they're so popular with tourists. So she's going to go from bourbon distillery to bourbon distillery. And while she's researching, she will become this amateur sleuth. So the first one is set in a small craft distillery. So they are brewing small batches of bourbon at a time. And then the second one is set in a major famous distillery that everyone has heard of. I will not mention the name. I don't want to get sued. But anyway, so I take the character in their vocation. My last series, they were a detective. So my central character was a brand new detective. So she's not an amateur sleuth, but she's brand new and no one has really trained her that well. So she runs amok of the FBI or local law enforcement because she's not sure of exactly what she can do and what she can't. So we have problems there, and it's just fun because I'm learning about the FBI, I'm learning about the sheriff's office and what they have jurisdiction. I'm learning about local police departments and when they call in the FBI and when they don't. So it's been fun. And so she's not really an amateur sleuth, is she's just a professional who's making a lot of mistakes. Chloe, wake up.
Great. Well, thank you. John, did you want to comment about your main character?
Just briefly, when I decided on the priest as the main character, I started looking at the other classical priest series, like Graham Greene has written some beautiful stuff, or Chesterton's Father Brown, that sort of thing. And when I placed Father Jake in the 21st century, that almost had to make him much different than Father Brown. I also gave him a bit of a rough background. And so Father Jake's different than Father Brown in that he really doesn't want to be a sleuth. He just gets in the middle of things that he has to work his way through, unlike Father Brown, who kind of enjoys being there. And his kind of rough upbringing gives Father Jake a bit more of an edge than Father Brown. So he, just being in the 21st century, kind of helped me develop my character.
Great. Well, we have some questions in the Q&A as well as in the chat. And you anticipated the first question from John Hoffman, who was asking about whether you were inspired by Father Brown. And I guess you were.
Mhm.
I was.
Good. Cheryl Johnson asks, do you all get to choose your own titles for your books?
I can start that one off.
Yeah.
It depends. There's been, for the candy shop books, the original title, the first book, which is A Salted Caramel, was The Last Chocolatier. That's what it was sold on in proposal. And then they wanted something punnier because as you'll notice in Cozy Mysteries, a lot of them have some pun or alliteration or something kind of cute to grab attention. So they actually came up with the title of Salted Caramel. And then every title after that, kind of knowing the format they were looking for, I would pick my candy and then try to come up with appropriate puns. So my book coming out Tuesday is Lemon Drop Dead. So it's and then I've had other series where they've changed every single title and I'm just like, okay. So I'm not married to any title because I know that they're going by what they think will sell the most copies and they study marketing and things like that. So I've never really gotten into a big argument with a publisher over that.
So we're starting to run out of time here. So I'll ask, any of the rest of you have any comments about your titles? Yes, John.
Yeah, my first one, DAROS, stands for Date of Expected Return from Overseas, and it's a coming home story. And they let me pick that one. My publisher in Seattle is Coffee Town, and like many publishers, they choose most titles and they do most covers. We battle over them sometimes, but they always win in the end. So it's the golden rule. They bring the gold, so they make the rules. I'm learning to live with that.
Oh, great. We had another question about research. Do any of you do research for your books? I'm sure you all do. So the question was specifically asked of Amanda. How did you do research for your Amish mysteries?
I travel there quite often. I live about an hour from Holmes County, so it's an easy drive to go down there. I even have spent the night in B&Bs and toured homes, but a lot of my research was living there for 3 years, kind of not knowing that I was going to be writing about it, but kind of absorbing the culture and knowing people and making those connections with people that mostly were former Amish. Since then, I have a friend that is not Amish, but she's conservative Mennonite and works at one of the flea markets down in Holmes County. So she's been very helpful. So, find the right people. I always feel like I've read a ton of books too, but like that first person experience you can ask from someone that's living there is just invaluable, I think.
Great. So I guess maybe one final comment from you all. Patricia asked, what suggestions or tips would you offer to authors interested in writing a cozy mystery series? So any helpful tips? Yes, Olivia.
There is a website. I think it's called Cozy Mystery Series or Cozy Mystery Corner, something like that, where it gives you, there are articles on the cozy mystery genre, what expectations there are, the types of amateur sleuths. I would suggest visiting that website. It also lists cozy mystery authors and their what they write about. So you can get a list of books that you can read to get more into the cozy mystery genre. Read a ton of cozy mysteries and do research on the genre and expectations. So it's not about knowing how to bound yourself in. It's about knowing how far you can push.
That's great advice. Anything anyone wants to add to that? I saw a lot of heads nodding, so I think we're all in agreement. Well, I'm sorry if we don't have time for, there might be one or two questions. Lots of positive comments, appreciating this session. This was great. Thank you so much to all of you. So thanks again to Mary Ellis, Amanda Flower, Eileen Curley Hammond, Olivia Matthews, and John A. Vanek. A reminder that you can get copies of the books by each one of these authors from the Book Loft of German Village at bookloft.com. So thanks again to our festival sponsors and partners, and thank you for joining us. Please check out the Ohioana website for all of this year's festival programming. So thanks for attending.
Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.